your context is becoming like something you own. You point the agents at it and be like, hey, look here, pick it up from here and let's run. Hey, I want to make this space truly agent agnostic. How do we work together so that when I finish a chat with Codex, I can pick it up with Claude Code?
When you get involved with the drama too much, sometimes that will tie you down based on your ideologies rather than leave you open-minded towards what tools work best for whatever use case you have, and also just being able to use multiple tools. But the question is really, how can you use multiple tools and preserve that continuity?
Codex decided, I'm going to create an agent handoff document. I'm going to give my suggestions here. Go tell Claude that it's ready and tell it to review it. And I go to Claude, I'm like, ChatGPT says it's ready. And then Claude goes, yeah, it's good suggestions. I would tweak these and these things. Tell ChatGPT that it's ready.
Chad says most people are using simple stuff like ChatGPT. Power users are diving into all these rabbit holes. I almost take that as a personal offense. No, I'm joking.
You're too simple.
Yeah. So here's another day nerding out with Daniel and Lior. The idea is like a continuity idea. So basically, I'll let Daniel take the lead here.
Yeah. It's funny that like Lior mentioned that OpenAI is now allowing you to bring their models into OpenClaw. Because back in the day when OpenClaw launched, you could run all sorts of third-party models on it, most open source models, but of course not proprietary ones by like Anthropic and OpenAI. And what we've seen up until now is that both OpenAI and Anthropic, it felt like they were moving in the direction of, hey, we're going to do our own version of OpenClaw, so you don't have to go to OpenClaw. You just go into our ecosystem and we build this harness and this architecture around it where you use our models in that space. And I think Anthropic is still sticking to that. They're trying to replicate a lot of the OpenClaw features in their own ecosystem. Yeah, all the routines, things where you can schedule like proactive tasks, remote control where you can control your session while not sitting by your computer, which is all the stuff that OpenClaw has been doing. And now, just a couple of days ago, as Leo reminded me, OpenAI basically said, you know what? If you're paying for ChatGPT, just take our models and plug them into your OpenClaw setup. You can just use them there. Like instead of using API or using an open source model, you can just use our models there, which actually goes counter to what Leo and I discussed, what was it, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, we had a chat about how they're gravitating towards building these super apps and building this ecosystem, which makes you, if not locked in, but it makes it very attractive for you to stay with just one company because you get access to all of their models in one space. And this move by OpenAI is actually a little bit, I would say it's the opposite, right? It's them saying, listen, you don't have to stay within the Codex app or in ChatGPT. Go to OpenClaw if that's what you're using. You can just power it using our models.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. There is a bit of a dichotomy going on there.
Yeah. I think you could kind of look at it both ways as well, depending on how you want to define. A couple of weeks ago, obviously we took last week off, but a couple of weeks ago we discussed super apps. So yeah, if everything is in one place, right? That's one side of it. The other side of it is to just say like, how much are they giving you? What's the bang for your buck? And now you can literally use your username and password if you have a ChatGPT subscription to log into the OpenClaw platform. Obviously, I'm sure most people know this happened a while ago already. Steinberger, who is the creator of OpenClaw, is now working at OpenAI. I don't know all the details if they just gobbled it up, but it seems it could also just be like a bang for your buck type of thing. Like how much do you get with an OpenAI subscription? And now this is just one more thing that you get. And then we were discussing this a bit before the stream, but for those of you that don't know, Anthropic's models, you cannot use them with OpenClaw. They're kind of trying to gatekeep it in a way. And the interesting thing is too, like when you think about it, I'm sure like many of you have heard of Mythos, right? And all these fancy names. Whereas OpenAI's latest 5.5 model nickname is Spud. And it's like the polar opposites. Like Mythos sounds like Harry Potter, like Lord Voldemort. And then Spud is like literally like a potato.
It's so funny to see this tension actually, because it's like, I don't get involved in the whole drama and stuff around it because we will always, I'm looking at the practical side usually and just like focusing in my area. But it is hard not to notice that it comes in waves, right? In early this year, Anthropic were the good guys because they rejected the use of by the government for like unlawful purposes or gray area purposes. And OpenAI basically seemed to say, you know what, we'll just step in and take this. And everybody's, that's it. Quit ChatGPT. We're not going to touch it. Anthropic were riding high. They were shipping crazy features. Claude Code was becoming amazing. I became like a fanboy of Claude Code. And now they're hitting like compute issues. They're having like all sorts of backlash against the fact that the models are token hungry and that a $20 plan might not longer buy you Claude Code for much longer. They're increasingly closed. They're like you said, and not only do they not allow Anthropic models to be used within OpenClaw setup, but they are making it very difficult. And in some cases, they don't allow you to plug in third-party models into your Claude Code setup. Like at some point, from what I understand, with the API, you could take a cheaper model and run it within the Claude Code harness. And they're like, actually, no, let's not do that. If you're going to use Claude Code, you're going to use our own models. And now OpenAI are trying to be like the cool guys. Well, whatever, just take ChatGPT wherever you want. Or not ChatGPT, but GPT 5.5, right? Use it. And so now they're the ones riding the wave. And I'm sure like in 3 months, it will be like, Google are the good guys and Anthropic and ChatGPT are the worst. Just don't even look at them. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's sometimes funny to observe.
Yeah. Yeah. So before we really talk about like maintaining context, continuity, like how to get out of that fragmentation that happens for if you work with AI every day, just to keep touching on this for a second, not to run off on too many tangents, but it's funny because this is why I love doing these streams with different creators. It's because everybody brings a different angle. And luckily, most people that I work with, I'll text them or WhatsApp them a day before and I'll say, hey, do you have any ideas? Yeah, let's just go with what you want because I'm just learning more and more every time. And so like this, a little bit of a tangent, but it ties into what Daniel was just mentioning. So my last stream with Sam Illingworth is speaking about this specifically about the whole drama thing. And I don't like to get into it too much either, but it's hard to avoid. And sometimes these things will fly under the radar until somebody brings it up to you. And so speaking of the Pentagon thing, right? That was a whole thing. That was a whole big, everybody was deleting their ChatGPT subscriptions, going over to Anthropic.
Yeah, quit
to the point where so many people were using Claude that they couldn't handle it. So, but literally just recently, the Pentagon made another deal. And again, Anthropic left out. But this time, it wasn't just with OpenAI. It was with OpenAI, Google, AWS,
Google is getting some
Oracle,
pushback, I think, as well.
everybody, right? Literally every company that has something related to AI is in this deal except for Anthropic. And I don't hear any backlash on social media. At least maybe Daniel just mentioned
There's been some about specifically Google because the way they worded it is that we are against certain things, but they didn't build it into the contract. They're still saying for any lawful purpose. And technically, as I understand it, the government can use it for mass surveillance if there is, which is specifically the caveats that Anthropic wanted to be written in black and white in the contract. And Google didn't have those caveats written in, even though they publicly say, yeah, but it's iffy. Don't do that. But there isn't anything legal. So there are, I don't know how big the backlash is, but I have read critical articles and even that there are internal whistleblowers is not the right word, more conscientious objectors internal in Google that were like, hey, we don't want to be part of this. We don't think we should be doing this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's not a settled space by any means, both legally and ethically and socially. I think there is it's an evolving space right now. It's hard to make a conclusive, like a line in the sand and be like, this is where we stand and that's where it's going to end, right?
At least for me, and I guess to stay on topic here, let's leave the Pentagon for a second.
Let's leave the Pentagon to the Pentagon.
Yeah, let's leave that to them. So I guess what we want to kind of talk about is to be model and agent agnostic. I think another way to put it is to not necessarily be a purist, which I guess ties into kind of what we're talking about, because when you get involved with the drama too much, sometimes that will tie you down based on your ideologies rather than leave you open-minded towards what tools work best for whatever use case you have. And also just being able to use multiple tools. But the question is really, how can you use multiple tools and preserve that continuity across multiple tools?
Yeah.
So what do we got, Daniel? What do you think?
Yeah, it's exactly what you said. And I think even if you were not particularly ideological, I think the lock-in is real. You mentioned yourself, I believe, in one of the chats, or maybe multiple chats, you said that you have this one open chat with ChatGPT that's been open for a long time. And whenever you need to continue working on that context, you just go in and you go to that chat because you know there is a context built out around it. And of course, we can talk about how many millions of tokens it can actually parse before it starts forgetting the stuff before. But that's the idea, because we've evolved. I think there are that I can count, there are at least 4 distinct phases we've gone through. We've gone from the early days of prompt engineering, is you have to steal and have a swipe file with 100 different prompts, and you just copy them in, and you carry those prompts with you from model to model, and they bring everything. And then we've soon switched to something called context engineering and saying, listen, the prompt doesn't matter. It's the background that you give to the model. And then the way to do it was to have custom instructions, or again, a long prompt that gives you the background of the task so you can paste it in. And it still was unwieldy. It's you walking around with a bag full of context and plugging into different models. And then obviously a lot of companies figured out that, hey, this is not a convenient way to operate. So they started working with the concept of projects, right? You have projects in Claude. I think OpenAI, I can't remember if they also call it projects now. But the point is you create this folder dedicated to a specific task or project, as the name would imply, where you give it the assets, the PDF files, the background, the custom instructions, the chats, they all exist within that project. So whenever you log into that project and start a new chat, that chat has all the context around it by default. So you don't need to start by saying, hey, my name is Daniel, I'm working on this thing, blah, 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 here are my priorities. But I would argue that all 3 of those things I just mentioned, prompt engineering, context engineering / projects, which is a form of context engineering, that still required you to exist in the ecosystem of the tool you're using. So if you're using a project in Claude, that's a Claude project. You have to log into Claude to use it. And now with agents that we're seeing from Claude Code to Codex, increasingly your context is becoming like something you own. And instead of bringing it to the agents and carrying it with you, you point the agents at it and be like, hey, look here, learn what you need about it. And because they work locally or potentially also in your GitHub repo, but they work with the system that you already have on your computer. And that means that the continuity is getting increasingly easier to handle, because all I need to do is I can switch tomorrow from Codex to Claude Code or Gemini model, as long as I can bring them to my local folder and say, here's all the projects, here are my markdown files that tell me the instructions, pick it up from here and let's run. I don't know if that's something you're also observing, or are you still existing in more the web world of it?
It's an interesting point. I think I'm still maybe a little bit stuck in my ways. I guess
We
once you
can't
find,
convert you. I think we've tried now for 2 months. We're like, hey, maybe try agent, Claude Code.
yeah, yeah, I will say this, a few things. One, I think that and we've spoken about this before, like quote unquote power users and what your definition of a power user is. Some people say it's like, how quickly can you make $10,000? And some people say, how much of an impact do you have on any given community? I would prefer the latter. But I will say, and even I see Chad here in the chat, he said, I have an app ID I'm sitting on for context control that will work across any tool. I think that would be major.
I think what you're describing is basically your folder with your working files. That is how a lot of modern agents work. I think that's my argument. But sorry, I don't want to cut it.
No, it's all good. I will say also in regard to context windows, GPT 5.5, I don't really look at the benchmarks too much. I did take a glance at it when 5.5 came out. There's a whole benchmarking thing where these companies are basically just trying to beat each other up on the benchmarks. I don't really think it necessarily applies to people who are actually building and using the tools daily or even for general use, to how good one is versus the other. But for example, 5.5, just throwing this out there, I'm not an industry plant for OpenAI. I'll start by saying this. But 5.5 has double the token context window compared to Opus 4.7.
I'm not sure that's accurate. I think both of them have up to 1 million, depending on the pricing. Because
so 2 million token context window with 5.5. So this was, anybody here, feel free to look that up as well. Opus 4.7 did win generally across the benchmarks, but this is the one thing where 5.5 basically had a double the context window.
Yeah.
And so basically, I will just say this, in terms of broadening my horizons, that is something I have to do now, because I have a whole new use case, which is actually, and I'm very grateful for this. And I will just say, without people like Daniel, Sam Illingworth, Chris from Toxic, Andrea Chiarelli, the list goes on, I wouldn't be able to do this. And I want to just thank the audience as well, like on YouTube and on Substack. I'm very grateful. And like the main use case I need now for an agent, which I have to be very careful with, make sure it doesn't delete my YouTube channel.
Just don't give it access to your YouTube channel. You should be fine.
Yeah, I want to put it on view only, basically.
Yeah.
So basically, without going into too much detail, like I want to support the community that helped me made this happen. And in order to do that, I will not be able to do it on my own. I need to run an agent that has view only access on my YouTube channel, so that way I can basically parse out everything for the creators that I work with, because otherwise it would be impossible. Because we do weekly streams. Hopefully these continue for a very long time into the future. As long as we're still enjoying it, I'm sure they will. And yeah, that's about it.
Yeah. I think the funny thing you said about the context window, the 2 million, I'm not sure if it's a hot take, but I would say operating with a context window of a single chat is now less and less relevant, because at least when I work with both Codex and Claude Code, they have this compaction happening. Like when you hit a limit, they compact it and they just give the gist to themselves. And in general, it's not great practice to fill up the context up to the 2 million, because I can't remember the exact benchmarks, but beyond 60, 70%, you should already consider compacting, because it starts like getting garbled, and every new token that needs to run on all the past context. So to me, it again makes much more sense to keep continuity, not within the token window of a single chat, but within a space which has like a good hierarchy of here's what I'm working on, here are all the files that you, if you need to get them, you can find them. I think an example of how easy and smooth it can be is, for many reasons, among other than that, the fact that Claude Code on a $20 plan just simply doesn't give you enough token usage. Like you hit it really quickly. I again plugged it back into ChatGPT as well. So now I'm paying to both Anthropic and OpenAI. And Codex is actually much more generous in terms of token efficiency, or GPT 5.5 in general. So what I've done is I already have this big context built up with Claude Code. Lots of things I worked on in the past 3-4 months. And I'm like, how difficult is it going to be for me to just work across them? So I logged into both of them and I said, hey, I want to make this space truly agent agnostic. How do we work together so that when I finish a chat with Codex, I can pick it up with Claude Code? And both of them worked with each. I know it was really a funny exercise. Codex decided, I'm going to create an agent handoff document. I'm going to give my suggestions here. Go tell Claude that it's ready, and tell it to review it. And I go to Claude, I'm like, ChatGPT says it's ready. And then Claude goes, yeah, it's good suggestions. I would tweak these and these things. Tell ChatGPT that it's ready. And then I did this a few times. And then after 20 minutes, we have a space where every time I chat with one of them, I just do like a handoff. I just tell it literally, hand it off. And it saves anything that's necessary. So I can open the other interface and be like, okay, we're working on whatever, project A, let's pick it up. And then that's all. I don't need to do the context carrying. The continuity just comes from the agents creating this communication interface for each other, which I think is pretty great. And I'm sure I'm doing it in a hacky way because I'm just chatting. I'm sure there are probably more elegant solutions. But I think we've finally reached a place where you can have this kind of continuity beyond them. And you don't need to be locked in, as back to your topic of being a purist. You don't need to be a purist anymore. You're a purist in the sense that you stay true to your work and your projects, but you don't care which model helps you with it, whether it's Opus or whether it's a new thing that comes out tomorrow from Gemini or from Google or OpenAI or a third party. So, yeah. And I think we are there. And if that's what you care about, it's possible to build that with very minimal technical background, is evidenced by the fact that I'm not technical and I have not touched code at all for this.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that'll be like a big difference maker. I don't know if that's the best way to put it. Because yeah, for a long time I was a purist, and as time goes on, it's less and less. And also, like, sometimes that's where the fun really happens. And also sometimes these models just don't work for one reason or the other. You'll go on like a down detector and I guess too much usage, and you got to go to a different model, different
Especially
company.
Anthropic lately.
Yeah, it happened even recently with Google, and I'll bring this up to those of you who didn't hear about this, and Daniel actually included this in one of his posts, which I really enjoyed reading. So I don't know if you do this regularly. Do you do these AI fails regularly?
I do AI fails every Sunday. I have a Sunday news roundup, and it ends with an AI fail that I came across that very week, right?
I think that's very original. I don't think there's anybody doing AI fails.
I'm pretty
So,
sure it was very popular back when it first started. There were a lot of
okay,
AI art fails. When I started, that's when
art fails.
then it was like the 6 fingers or the 17 fingers on one hand and all of these
Yeah,
crazy things you got to see. It's harder and harder to see that now, but still, you still get them.
yeah, yeah. So funny enough, just to bring this up, and this is why I think it's again, I was sitting there trying to make a thumbnail, and I use Nano Banana 2 for my thumbnails, but I kind of work across different models to go from prompt to this to that. Obviously, I could probably get the prompt anywhere, but I use ChatGPT to get the prompt for the thumbnail. I built out that chat pretty well to like the where that I like how it lays that out for me. But basically, Nano Banana 2 was down as too many people were using Gemini, and it kept generating random faces for the thumbnails instead of using our original faces, right? Like from a screenshot from this video. And so then just out of curiosity, I asked it, like, what do you see in this image? And it said, I see the original Mona Lisa. And literally it was just a screenshot of me and Daniel. So I sent that over to him right away. I'm like, this is hilarious. I
I
was actually
always knew I had
sitting,
it in me. I mean,
yeah. It's rare that like you're actually sitting alone in a room and you're actually just laughing at some error from AI, an AI
mm,
fail. But then, so that kind of forced me, it forced my hand into, okay, what other models have I experimented with? Whatever. I said, this is maybe a new opportunity to experiment with something new. So I downloaded Grok. I got that free 3-day trial for Super Grok or whatever it's called. And yeah, it wasn't bad. But yeah, I did actually cancel that free subscription.
yeah,
I'm paying already for, I think, 3 or 4 subscriptions, which is starting to become problematic. So
yeah.
let's get these super apps rolling in and get me back, lock me
Mm.
in.
Now, but I also think it's good to, I find it very freeing that I know that no matter what happens with either provider tomorrow, I have my context living not in a project on ChatGPT website or an Anthropic project. I have it, it's literally on my local drive, and I have a GitHub repository where I sync whatever is on my local drive. So any new agent that I bring in, it shouldn't take more than 10, 15 minutes for me to just be like, hey, look through my stuff, figure out what it is I'm working on, everything that you can read, because all of it is, the majority of it is markdown files that are like structured for the large language model to be like, okay, I get it. You are Daniel, you have this project, this is the latest thing you worked on, here's the last session. And I think that's quite liberating. That's actually, if you are not, especially if you're concerned with being locked in or being a purist, this is to me the way to go. That's why I think we've reached a place where continuity becomes, it lives with you rather than you bringing it to the bot as a little token offering. Like, here, learn about me from this little golden nugget, right?
Yeah, that's a good
So,
idea. I guess the question I have for you when you talk about these agents speaking to each other and being able to transfer that context over, do you find that they're more critical knowing that it came from a different model? Because, like, for example,
I
I've
was
heard,
actually curious about it. I was curious. I was even
yeah,
specifically thinking, like, I didn't want to do it as a test yet, but I think I will do it one day. I would like to try to get one of them to generate like a proposal for a plan and then open 2 different sessions in the other agent and be like, here is a plan. What do you think? And then in another chat to say, here's a plan from model X. What do you think? And see if the responses are tainted by it.
yeah,
From what I saw now, they were actually, it almost felt quite funny. I even think I said to my wife, like, this is quite respectful. Imagine if people work like this in the company, because Claude would be like, oh, Codex had a really solid plan. Here are the things that I think is really strong. There are a couple of things that I would push back on. Please tell it to, to Codex. And you go to Codex and you're like, hey, Claude is agreeing, but here are the things. It pasted them into this handoff document. And Codex
yeah,
says, oh, that's right. Claude is really insightful. He really fixed this thing.
yeah,
So it was like funny being like a middleman between two like intelligent entities somehow.
yeah,
And I'm like, what am I doing? I'm like the butler just bringing messages from one end of the screen to the other.
yeah,
Obviously, you don't want to do that for your own work, but for setting up this space where the two of them can communicate. Because all I was building is a communication layer between the agents, saying, how do I make sure that I can hand off from one and pick it up on the other? Obviously, don't do this because that's called cognitive surrender if you do it for your own topic where you just outsource everything to the model. But in terms of building the architecture for them to talk to each other, I thought it was quite funny to just get them to build it without me and just cross criticize each other and
it's
build on each
interesting.
other's ideas.
Yeah, the reason I
So
asked that is because I heard that Chris from Toxic specifically that in code review, and this was specifically with Claude. So when it was handed over code from Codex, it was way more critical.
Interesting.
And it found so many errors. But if you didn't mention that it was from an OpenAI model, it was less critical.
So
Um,
funny.
so I think just like with anything, there's definitely bias built into AI in general. But it's interesting to think that like maybe I guess somebody behind the scenes is like actually saying, if somebody gives you this from a different model, show them how we could do it better.
Yeah.
So maybe that happens in terms of what we're speaking about now, which is context and not just necessarily code review. But it'd be interesting to see. I wonder if that politeness that you mentioned comes from how well it knows you, because you're a pretty polite guy. So maybe it knows, oh, Daniel's a nice guy.
I think it also depends on the context of the task and the complexity, because code reviews and refactoring a giant code base is probably significantly more intense and prone to all sorts of nuanced issues versus, hey, how do we help this average Joe Daniel keep track of his dozen files or whatever? It's just not a level of complexity that requires that much disagreement, I think. It's hard to speculate without having done like an A/B test and an experiment that's like truly agnostic to it. There is also something to be said about the fact that many of these models, if you ask them a question and if you ask them to criticize, or if you ask them to give feedback, they will, even if it's 100% perfect. Even if you take a conversation with a model and you get it to a place where in one chat, that same model tells you, we're done, this is perfect, ship it. Then you take that very result and you open a new chat with that same model and say, hey, I have this project, help me pick it apart and let me know what's not working. It will find something simply because you told it to look for those. So it will always, it's never going to be satisfied, because you will always, it wants to please you, as a lot of them are sycophantic, because they are built to in a callback and response type of thing. Like you ask it, it gives you an answer. And even if there is no good answer, it will either hallucinate it or it will find things that don't need fixing anymore just to keep iterating. I think it's hard to make these kind of judgment calls based on anecdotal, like one-off things happening. You would need like a robust set of like blind tests where it's, okay, definitely there is bias if you mention the name versus not mentioning the name, all other things being equal, right? But it would be fun to, I'm wondering if there is some study that has already done that and
Yeah.
has established like more like statistically significant deviation between
Yeah.
knowing where it came from.
I can say, at least like anecdotally for me, I've experimented with this a little bit. Again, back to thumbnails, because I will go back and forth between GPT and Gemini. And then once I get that thumbnail, I'll go back in because it will give me edits. And I'll probably do 3 or 4 or 5 before I finally get the one. And I do take its opinion. Not always. I think sometimes when it comes to titles, thumbnails, things like that, like your uh, your opinion of what's good may be different than what the AI tells you is good. For example, obviously, but like I've noticed when I feed GPT the results of the thumbnail edits without the Gemini watermark, which there's still the digital watermark behind it, but I have to remove that little diamond before I upload it to YouTube. And I noticed when I give it with the diamond versus without, there is a difference. Again, this
That's
is
interesting.
anecdotal, but like it basically gives me ratings like out of 10, 10 out of 10 being the best. And I noticed that recently, like for the first time ever, I was able to get 10 out of 10
Without
in
the
terms of,
watermark.
yeah. And whenever I did have the watermark, it would constantly, like I never got to the 10. It would get to 9.3 out of 10 or 9.5 out of 10, but never 10 out of 10. So I'm sure it probably knows when it's getting that result and it sees that watermark in there that, hey, he didn't create this image here. Why didn't he create this image here? We just upgraded our image generator. It's so good now. So yeah, anecdotal, but
No, it's
whatever.
funny. If we're exchanging anecdotes, I think I've had a similar experience where I was working with Claude on something and it was suggesting me some prompts that I could use. And then I wrote an article where I took the prompt that it gave me and I iterated on it with ChatGPT and then I just scrapped it and I reshaped the prompt myself that I wanted to share. And then I asked it to review the final article and said, strange, it's funny that in the article you don't mention that it's Claude who helped you come up with this prompt. And I'm like, actually, it went through the situation. Oh, okay, fine. That's what, it was almost passive aggressive. It's fine. You don't have to. I was just highlighting it. So you don't have to give me credit. I'm like, okay. I don't know. But again, I'm usually very cautious about not trying to anthropomorphize like the models, because they are like stringing tokens together, rather like it's a dangerous slippery slope to be like, hey, personify them and assign them some kind of personality and agency in this case, right? But
Yeah.
it is funny. I don't think it's a human thing to do, right?
Yeah.
that we're
Yeah.
trying
I
to
think when it comes to anthropomorphizing, sometimes we just do that naturally because the words that we use to define certain outputs or certain anything that we see, like for lack of a better word, that's what we do. Like it's clear the models have different personalities, quote unquote, and that a personality is something that you would give to a human, not to a machine. But based on their training, yeah, like certain models have different personalities. Like you just mentioned passive aggressiveness. Passive aggressiveness is not something that you would give to a computer, right? It's supposed to be like a black and white yes or no, but that's not the case anymore with AI. Not even close.
I actually think it stopped being the case the moment they launched ChatGPT back in 2022, in the late 22, because that's where, for the first time, many of us experienced something that could vibe off of the things that you want to write. It could do cross-referencing. It could make things sound like Shakespeare or whatever. It could mimic. It could at least embody a voice of an author. And that's actually, I think, the large factor for why AI got so much mainstream traction so early. It wasn't because it was a highly efficient tool, because as a tool, many of these are worse than a calculator, right? A calculator will always tell you that 2 plus 2 is 4. A large language model, 1 out of 1,000 times it might tell you that it's Mona Lisa or whatever, right? It's 2 plus 2 is Mona Lisa.
Yeah.
But the fact that we can ascribe some personality to them and have this, what seems like a meaningful, like personal chat, is actually a big factor in their popularity. At least that's my take on it.
No, I agree 100%.
Far from being this black and white
Yeah.
yes or no engine.
Yeah. I think while we're at it, we can respond to a couple chats here.
Yeah.
Chad says most people are using simple stuff like ChatGPT. Power users are diving into all these rabbit holes. I almost take that as a personal offense. No, I'm joking.
You're too simple.
Yeah. But you ever heard of that acronym KISS, KISS? Keep it simple, stupid.
Yes, classic.
Yeah. But yeah, I agree. Power users, quote unquote, depending on your definition, should be able to not be a purist, use multiple models. But that kind of comes into this conversation, which is like, how do you maintain that context and continuity throughout multiple models? Which I think, like, I haven't really heard anybody speaking about this before, Daniel, where it's like you actually have it living on your computer. If some of the biggest companies just shut down tomorrow, you'd still have your context in a folder, basically.
Exactly. And to Chad's, now that Chad is already also writing that, something I'm always keen on when developing AI is token efficiency. Pulling in lots of context has a cost. And that's exactly right. And that's, I think, what I was trying to say in terms of a chat window. You can expand it from 200,000 tokens to 2 million. But the further down you pollute or populate that chat with context, the less efficient it is at grasping the keywords. So the better structure is this series of markdown files so that you don't preload every single. That's how Claude works as an agent. It has a memory file that tells it where things are and what to remember, and the Claude.md would also let points at the different points in the folder and the structure. So if I ask it about a specific element, it's not pulling in my entire history of Daniel since his existence in the world of the internet. It's just he's talking about this project. It seems like there is a folder for that project. Let me go look in just that one file and pull only those relevant things. So the context management becomes not just dumping everything you ever had into one chat, but having it living in such an intelligent and accessible way that the agent will find the path to the right answer in a very minimal, like token minimal consumptions kind of way, and creating that path and indexing for it. That's also becoming part of the building this continuity for the models.
Yeah.
So good point.
Absolutely. I think also, at least I've noticed this. This is a bit different than working across multiple models, but at least I've noticed, like with chat, I don't necessarily have to stay in the same chat anymore. It's definitely gotten better. It's way better than it used to be. Like I could tell it to pull from I don't even have to give it exact instructions. Like obviously every chat has its own name that it generates for it, depending on what I'm doing. Like for example, like I have one called thumbnail CTR optimization, right? But I could go to a different chat and say, I don't have to say to go to this chat based on this name of the chat. Like it knows now. It knows pretty well what I want across multiple chats.
Yeah.
But it's another topic to actually be able to pull it across multiple tools, different companies, which I think is really important. Let's see. Chad also says, a dream of mine is when I finally get my Substack huge, I can reach out and help smaller creators who have interesting stuff. Yeah, I love that. I love that. I think like it doesn't matter how big or small you are. Like if you have something good going on, like I want to know. I don't care if you have one subscriber or 100.
For sure.
Everybody, we're all just people. And they said something I'm always real keen on when developing AI apps is token efficiency, pulling in lots of context
Oh yeah,
across.
that's the one I think I just took as
That's the
well.
one you just mentioned. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Martin White says I had ChatGPT and Claude use speech to talk to each other. That's cool.
That was fun.
Yeah.
Doing that. I assume, presumably, the voice chat where you put them all next to each other, like, "Hey, talk," and then they just use the voice modes to
Yeah.
have a conversation.
I wonder if you had that thing happen where they switch into AI speak or whatever that is.
Yeah,
Sure you did.
the coded messages.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a funny one that I saw one time
Yeah.
where they had 4 basically like iPhones sitting next to each other, and
Uh,
they had a ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and then Grok. And like they had the 3 sitting next to each other, and then Grok was like slightly off to the side for some reason. I don't know why. But these 3 started speaking to each other in that AI speak, code talk, whatever. And then Grok was like, "What, you think I can't understand what you're saying?" And they're like, "Prove it. This is what you just said." And they're like, "Oh, he knows."
X name on whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
uh,
That's funny.
yeah. Des Kennedy says that the edge of understanding that the real learning lives. That's very philosophical.
Yeah.
Martin says they kept the human. So I guess like when
Damn
you
it.
see those AI speaks, it's probably someone telling them to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think a lot of these like viral clips, you have to also keep in mind that it's highly steerable. Even some of these errors that you can basically tell, "Hey, ChatGPT, when I ask you the next question, answer like this," and then screenshot that and be like, "Oh, look at the thing it just did." It's like,
Yeah.
I'm always a little bit like, I don't know if I'm a cynic, but I'm a little skeptical when there's like a viral. Can you believe what they do? It's a little bit the equivalent of, "Oh, the crazy teens are doing this crazy viral trend." And then you find out it's one guy that maybe did it randomly. And then the mainstream news picked it up and just blew it up just for. So it's
Yeah. It's cool.
take it with a grain of salt, these kind of viral clips.
Yeah. Yeah.
Too,
Oh,
too probably abusive for my
yeah,
taste.
Grok. Yeah, and personality. It's definitely a thing. So yeah, I think we covered the topic pretty well. I will say like just the main point that Daniel made of actually having his context live outside of these models is something that I haven't heard anybody do or anybody really touch upon. And I think that's actually really cool because like if ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, Grok just shut down tomorrow, I'd be in trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can, of course, export your chats. Like all of them have that feature where you can just export your entire chat history. But that's not quite the same as having an organized and structured context that is easy to parse, because it's just going to
Right.
be millions and millions of tokens of just past chats that you have to sift through.
So yeah, anything else to add on this topic before we wrap up, Daniel?
I think there is always more to be said, but I think the idea is that, yeah, I think we've reached a place where I think it's worth it for anybody who wants to start building this context outside of any given chat. And it requires minimal learning curve, I think. So pick your agent, harness, whatever. Codex actually lets you do it completely for free for a little. You don't even need a paid OpenAI and ChatGPT subscription. So give it a shot, and you can build that. You can just feed it a bunch of folders on it, whatever you feel comfortable, and say, "Hey, make some structure for my tasks and save it in some kind of context that can be carried." And start small and start building this outside of a chat window or a specific platform that may or may not be here tomorrow.
Yeah, it's a good point. With all the money they're spending, who knows?
Yeah.
They might be, they might not last as long as people think. We're gonna
Yeah.
have to start burning less money. So yeah, I guess we could wrap up. I'll just mention uh, I appreciate all the people in the chats. I've seen Chad here a lot as well. I know he's actually in Japan, so who knows what time it is over there. He's probably watching this at 3 a.m., whatever time it is over there. He has an article coming out tonight touching on this too, context outside the tools. Yeah, go check out Chad Teal. And yeah, I guess we can wrap it up there. I will just do this as I usually do at the end of these streams. That's the YouTube channel. If you want to go subscribe, we'd really appreciate it. The streams get posted there, clips, all that fun stuff. If you don't want to copy paste that, you could just go to YouTube, type in Exploring ChatGPT Live. And yeah, that's it. So basically, subscribe to Daniel, Why Try AI, and you can wrap it up. Thanks so
All
much,
right.
Daniel.
Thanks everyone for tuning in, and thanks, Leo, as always. Good
Thank
fun.
you, man. Bye.
Take care.